Well, the last time I made a mistake was back, I think it was 1968, when I got a fourth digit of a mathematical problem incorrect. Yeah. But I did say that Captain Marvel was going to tank, and it turns out it didn't. So that makes 2 in that's almost, well, it's 40 years.
It's nearly 200 years.
That's a long time, and I apologize.
You guys suck at math.
While I may be wrong in fact, I am in fact correct in my own mind. I identify as correct. So let me talk a little bit about Captain Marvel, the latest addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, because as it turns out, while the numbers actually were pretty good on it, the things that I predicted that would make the numbers not good are in fact there. So here, I know everybody wants to know what there's a political point to this, and there is, so stay with me on this. But it looks like...
Can I just get clarity on this? So you're
Sure.
saying that the things are in the movie that you thought would be in the movie, but they did not have a deleterious effect upon the movie at the box office.
Yes. If I knew what deleterious meant, I would say that would be the case.
What he's saying is the things that you knew would be in the movie didn't actually stink up the joint.
Sure. Okay. So, but seriously, there is an actual political point to this. So it looks like the new Captain Marvel movie, which... Again, I thought was just essentially humorless and just rather, barren and these female fighter pilots walking off the runway and the fashion runway, and into the jets. But put all that aside for a minute, because it looks like Captain Marvel has become another example of what the pop culture has started to call Mary Sue. I've talked about this before, but it bears talking about again because it gets really to how the progressive, especially progressive feminists, think, and how what they think cheats actual feminism in the same sense that transgendered athletes basically disenfranchises all of the thousands and thousands, millions of young girl athletes across the country. So here's the situation. Captain Marvel is all powerful and has no lessons to learn. She doesn't suffer any of the slings and arrows. She's simply just perfect and gorgeous and powerful and superior and all the rest of it. This kind of character is called a Mary Sue. It's based on an old piece of parody, it turns out, of a little piece of fiction written back, I want to say, in the 70s about an ensign named Mary Sue who served on the original Enterprise. She was 15 years old, graduated first in her class at Starfleet. Kirk fell in love with her, Spock fell in love with her too. And during the 3 paragraphs of this story, she managed to save the Enterprise, save the entire Federation, live just long enough to have everybody bow down and realize what a life-changing, history-changing person she was before dying tragically in the midst of some kind of dilithium accident. So this idea of the all-powerful character is something that, especially the all-powerful female character, something I think really needs bears discussion. So, Scott, we saw in the original Star Wars movie, we saw Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, who when we first meet him is a whiny kind of a little snot. I want to go to college this year, Uncle Owen. Well, you have to stay and help us with the moisture farm. Well, I wanted to go to college. The first time he picks up a lightsaber, nearly runs himself through, and the first time he's practicing with it, this little tiny idiotic droid, which is shooting like as slow as it'll go, it's on like 0, it's on the 0 setting. Zap, zap, zap. I can't do this. All of the 3 movies it took for him to go from a guy who's never held a lightsaber to become the ultimate lightsaber warrior, simply so that he could throw the lightsaber away.
Yeah.
We saw during those 3 movies failure, grit, resistance, depression, determination, encouragement, hopelessness, all of these things that turned him into a real character. But when when the Star Wars final trilogy came out, we meet this character of Rey, who, like Luke, is just from a desert planet, just a scrappy kid with a beige-colored outfit. And this time, she never has flown before, but she walks into the Millennium Falcon and makes Han Solo look like an idiot. And then she picks up a lightsaber, and having no training whatsoever, defeats the current Darth Vader in a lightsaber fight. So this is the definition of a Mary Sue. And I contend that by cutting out all of the failure and all of the hardship and all of the overcoming, they're actually cheating young women of what a role model really should be in the way that Luke Skywalker was. And Rey certainly isn't.
Yeah, and it's the worst thing. It makes you wonder about the motives of people who try to advance these kind of characters, because you either have to believe that they're not really trying to help women, worst possible scenario here, or they're just ignorant and they don't understand how to create a character that could be encouraging to women.
Right.
I mean, this is like somebody who would write, that Harriet Tubman, somehow pre-invented the Hyperloop and was able to shuttle slaves out of the South
That's
at
right.
600 miles per hour.
That'd be even more awesome. And she just did it. She just invented it.
And I think at the heart of it, it's not enough that a woman be exalted or glorified or seen as excellent. She also has to be so in a way that no man possibly could. So she has to be elevated to a position essentially without effort, and so that makes men look bad. In essence, women are born with that ability.
That's right.
And all I'm trying to say as a screenwriter is that you need to just release that inner, what's the girl's name? Ray? Ray. You've got to release the inner Ray inside of you. It doesn't require any effort on your part. Just use the force. You're just
born with it.
Once you know it, you'll be able to have it. And that is the most despicable thing a so-called feminist could do to a young woman, is to imply to her that there is no struggle involved. To imply to her that somehow you wake up in the morning and you step out of bed and your hair is perfectly made and your clothes always look perfect and you never stumble and then somehow great things will happen to you. This is not new in theater. I mean, this goes back to the Greeks with their Deus Ex Machina endings to plays, which is basically the God in the machine. They used to have this kind of platform that was on a lever that would come down
and
out of the
solve
sky.
all of the problems.
Yes, and the God. I actually experienced this one time. I was in a play that went so badly in rehearsal that we begged the director not to force us to perform it, but the performance dates were already scheduled. And we got out there. We had not yet practiced the third act. This is how bad rehearsals were going. So we get out there in the middle of the third act, and we just froze up. I'm on stage. Other people are on stage. Nobody knows their line. Somebody forgot their line, and so a cascade of nobody being able to say their line. And Michelle Harris comes out on stage. She was actually done in the play. Her storyline was over. She came out on the stage, and she directed everybody from the stage, live in front of a studio audience, so to speak, to complete the play and finish the story. Now, as it turns out, it just occurred to me, Michelle Harris was a black woman. So, but that was irrelevant to the story. She rescued our tales. Now, the reason why Michelle Harris was able to rescue us is because she learned the play.
Yeah.
She knew the lines. She worked harder than anybody. That process was more difficult for her than it was for anybody else. And so she stepped out on stage and did what only the director should have been able to do, but the director could not do because she couldn't step on stage. And that's the kind of story that needs to be told to young women. It is be competent, be learned, be persistent, be willing to sacrifice so that you can develop excellence. And that's how you outshine competitors.
Steve, because I think this whole Mary Sue phenomenon and Rey in Star Wars and Captain Marvel is exactly destructive in the same way that its basic philosophy is destructive, because I think both of these characters, among others, are examples of the self-esteem movement. And basically what they're saying is, we're going to say that you're powerful and strong, and therefore you go out and be powerful and strong. They don't understand that you become powerful and strong by being weak and helpless. So here's the interesting question, Steve. Some people who fight back against this say, oh, you're just sexist against strong female characters. Well, Superman, they'll say, was a Mary Sue. Superman had unlimited powers, and Superman had the ability to do anything. But this conveniently glosses over the fact that the reason Superman is because he spent a number of years on a farm with his dad, Mr. Kent, and told him, no, you don't get to run the 100-yard dash in an eighth of a second. You don't get to play football faster than a speeding bullet, and beat his ego down and beat him. Basically, when I say beat him, I mean just made him understand that you have to fail. You can't use these magical abilities magically because it's not fair to you or anybody else. So this idea, Steve, that it's almost like Captain Marvel gets up, she reads her daily affirmation, I am powerful, I am strong, and then goes out and then destroys the evil in the universe. And it's
by shooting lasers out of her hands.
It's cheap. it's cheap. Yeah. It's not accurate. It's not fair.
A lot here. First, Superman does have a weakness, and it's not kryptonite. It's what Zod said in Superman 2. He actually cares about these creatures.
He's restrained by his own morality, and that's all.
Exactly. This is his adopted planet, and we treated him right, and he cares. That is his weakness, and it gets you right here every time Zod says that, even though Superman 2 is got a lot of flaws to it. Zod cut to an essential truth right there, and to me, that's what makes the character. I can explain some of Captain Marvel's box office, despite your predictions. They sold 4 tickets to me and my family because we didn't want to go into Endgame, the last Avengers movie, without the vital information of Captain Marvel, who is apparently going to play a big role in Avengers Endgame. And, I've got 2 sons, 13 and 8, who are really invested in these movies. And even though they weren't very excited about the trailer, they had to see it before Endgame. And, I sat down. I was more or less entertained for a couple of hours. But as my 13-year-old pointed out, when he heard they were making a movie out of Captain Marvel, he said, she's just OP, which I had to ask what OP was. Overpowered, which is... Yeah, yes. It's not that interesting when the superhero can fly around shooting lasers out of their eyeballs at everything and just blowing them up. There's no struggle there, as you correctly noted. I want to compare that, though, to another superhero movie that I can't count the number of times we've watched it in my house, and that is Wonder Woman, the one that came out a couple of years ago with Gal Gadot, which is just... This is how you do a superhero movie. You watch her struggle to learn the skills she needs to become a warrior princess, and to struggle against her own mother, who wants to keep her protected because she's the only child on the entire island of Amazon women. You watch her struggle against her own revulsion at the horrors of the First World War. But she never loses her femininity either. She falls in love. She has to send the man... No, she has to not intervene when the man she loves has to go sacrifice himself so that she can be free to defeat the big bad guy. It is a textured and deep movie, on the superhero scale, that we watch again and again. My wife has one of those metal Wonder Woman emblems on the back of her car. She loves this movie so much. And we walked out of Captain Marvel, and we saw it, and that was about it. I think they could have made a more interesting movie out of a little tiny scene and called it Nick Fury, Closet Cat Person.
Well, here's obviously what's happening. Hollywood is under fire for being the lecherous, scum that they are. The Me Too movement and all of this requires now that a strong woman character comes out and Hollywood has to make a stand against all of this stuff. And this is the trap. The trap is you create this magical character that all superheroes are magical, but all of them have a story of how they got there. The Hulk, for example, is incredibly powerful, but he's tormented by the fact that he's a bull in a china shop, and he is not like, hey, this is awesome, I'm the Hulk. Same thing with Spider-Man, same thing with Batman. Batman's parents were murdered. He had to go through all these, constantly going through these psychological issues. It's just bad writing. It's just plain bad writing, and it's lazy writing. And laziness is the essence of the self-esteem movement. And it's the self-esteem movement that created Mary Sues like Ray and Captain Marvel, and a Mary Sue like Wesley Crusher, if you happen to be a Star Trek Next Generation fan, who was born perfect. He knows everything. He can do everything. He's 15 years old. He's driving the Enterprise. Look at me. It debases everything else, and it doesn't raise him. So the thing that is so interesting on a separate level politically is that I've maintained for a long time that this entire generation of millennials and Gen Y do nothing but play video games and are absolutely obsessed with things like Marvel Comics, and you'll see 35, 40-year-old stockbrokers, they're going to close like a $3.5 billion deal, and they've got a little, Yoda action figure sitting on top of this and stuff. I'm convinced that they went into this world to get away from the social justice warriors. In a video game, you get to blow things up and shoot guns and drive fast and act like a conservative. And the thing of it is that the left is following them into these worlds and ruining the worlds of Star Wars and Star Trek and Marvel and all the rest of it. So I'll just close by saying this. They always say that the reason that people like me have a problem with Captain Marvel is because I can't stand the idea of a strong woman character, and it's threatening to my patriarchal, paper-thin masculine ego and all the rest of it. But just to hammer the point home past any redemption, let's just take a quick look. Let's just take a quick look at one of the greatest characters ever in the movies, and that's Ripley from Aliens, from 4 Alien movies, I guess. When we think of Ripley, when we think of this, because for those of you not familiar, she's a lead character in a movie called Alien, and then Aliens, and so on. But the iconic image of her is in an elevator in a T-shirt with a bandolier on. She's holding a flamethrower, and she's going down into this hive to rescue this little girl, and that is the image of the powerful woman. And I was like, go get him. I was with Ripley the whole way. But that's not how you met Ripley. Ripley was one of 7 members of a crew who were wiped out by the first of these alien creatures, absolutely terrified, just by coincidence happened to be the last one to escape, uses her wits, just scared to death of this creature, and at every step in the second movie, she keeps expecting, naturally enough, that the men and women of the Marines would go in and do their job because they're warriors, and she has to rise to this occasion because there's no one else to do it.
So good.
So what you saw in Ripley was you saw the same kind of transformation you would see in Luke Skywalker, the kind of transformation that is healthy for boys and girls. Yeah. And that's the idea that you can start out as essentially weak and powerless, and through hard work, courage, determination, getting back up after you fail, you will go through this process by which you become powerful. And to deprive young women of this by having this kind of fist-pounding kind of social justice warrior saying, we are powerful, we are strong, we are powerful, we are strong. That's why Luke had to be destroyed. Now that you've got Rey, what do you need Luke for? He's going to basically be a grumpy old cynic. And I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it because it's manipulating things that I loved growing up. But I especially hate it because, once again, the people who claim to be the champions of women and people of color and all of the oppressed are making a shortcut that puts them immediately on the reward, and they think that this somehow is going to make the issue better, when all it does is make it much, much, much worse. If these people, if these far leftists who made Captain Marvel and Rey, if they'd been actual feminists, they wouldn't have had any problem having a woman fail and then get up again and then fail again, because failing is how you get to success. And to pretend that it's not is just plain sexist drivel. We don't go for it. We're against it. Some people for it, but we're against it. That'll do it for this edition of Bill Whittle Now, who, by the way, may have noticed Scott Ott is here in the studio in Los Angeles. He'll be back home tomorrow working like a slave as usual. So on behalf of Scott and Steve and all of the paying members of BillWhittle.com, I'm Bill. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next week.